Shalom. Call Haloyamla, Yahapwa, Bahashum, Yahapashai, Bahashum, Rachakudash, Brakata Yahapwa, Brakata Yahapashai, Brakata Rachakudash, Bahashum, Yahapashai, Bahashum, Rachakudash. Shalom, and double honors to the elder apostles of Great Millstone. Shalom to the elders in the Akim and the Akwata, the hopeful elect. Shalom. I want to go to a quick video. It's kind of like a part two to the last video I did. In regards to salvation is to the Israelites. So it was a couple of precepts that I had forgot to include, but it was still, great edification through the Spirit by Hashem Yahushai. But it kind of brought a whole nother lesson as well on top of that. So I'm going to bring those precepts out, excuse me, and then also, kind of expand on it a little bit more. So we'll start over here in book of James, chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, James, a servant of Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, and of the Lord, Yahushai Hamashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. So, Paul's letters were all written to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and not to the heathen Gentiles. So we'll go from there to get a little history on how it got to that point where the Messiah was going after the lost Israelites, and Paul sent his letters after the lost Israelites as well. So Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse 14, we'll start there. It reads, Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? So that's another clue that proves that the people claiming to be Israel are not, because that's a key characteristic of the Israelites, that we will be always in servitude to the other nations. But when you look at everything that's owned in the earth, the media, Hollywood, the Diamond District, everything, just to name a few things, right? Everything is run by who? The little hat people. So they're not spoiled. They spoil everyone else, because if they say anything, then what they do, they get cut off. Just ask Kyrie Irving and Kanye West, right? So they're not a slave, they're not a servant, they're not spoiled. But everyone else that says anything, they're the ones that are spoiled. So the true Israelites are so-called blacks, Latinos, Native American Indians. So this chapter in context is speaking of the Israelites. So dropping down to verse 20. For of old time I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands. So what's that yoke? The yoke is the covenant of the commandments that we made in the wilderness with the Most High, with Moses, the children of Israel. So that yoke is being broken, because now, we had went off. So for of old time I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands, and thou saidest, I will not transgress. When upon every high hill and under every green tree thou wanderest playing the harlot. So that green tree. So first that high hill, that's going into metaphorically in certain contextual instances. Mountains represents nations, other nations. Mountains represents nations, and then hills also represents nations. So this high hill is talking about other nations. Upon every high hill, meaning every other nation, every other heathen nation, and under every green tree, and a green tree is a man, and that's where you learn different philosophy. That's where they learn different philosophies and doctrines of these other men. Thou wanderest playing the harlot. And what does that mean? Spiritual fornication, learning the philosophies of the heathen. These other high hills and other green trees are the people within these other nations. That Israel, because we've always had that problem, always loving the customs and the philosophies and way of living of the heathen, and not and always and and committing sin against the Most High, and provoking the Most High to anger. And then that's how we get judged, and that's how we're always a homeborn slave. And the Most High is answering that question to Jeremiah. That's why Israel is always a servant and always spoiled, because they always playing the harlot, disobeying the Most High commandments. So, and that's how they became Gentiles over hundreds of years of doing that. And then verse 21, yet I had planted thee a noble vine, wholly a right seed. So the only right seed are the Israelites, and that noble vine, that's the righteous nation, the Israelites, through the commandments the Most High gave us. And chiefly, the root of that vine is Yahushua. How then art thou turned into a degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? So strange meaning strange nation, a strange vine, a strange tree. And so that's a strange nation. We became degenerate. How? By when you read verse 20, the Israelites were taking on the customs of the heathen and going and playing the harlot and taking on their philosophies. And that made Israel what? Degenerate. Degenerate because these other heathen nations are degenerate nations. So these are the Israelite Gentiles in the New Testament that the Messiah came in the flesh to go ahead and go track down and bring back in through the proper doctrine. And then Yahushua taught up Paul. And then Paul went on his travels, and he went and he sent letters after them as well to teach them and root them in the word of them, in the true in the vine, who is Yahushua. So that's all it's all about. It's really plain, when you really understand the history and then understand the scriptures. The Holy Spirit have to be dealing with you to be able to process and comprehend this, because it's really plain. Actually, this is letting us know that the Israelites went off and became degenerate, like the degenerate heathen nations. Why? Because they took on the degenerate philosophies of the heathen, being harlots, being whores, committing spiritual fornication against the Most High with these heathen nations, making them what? A strange vine and a degenerate plant that the Most High made holy and right from the beginning. How? Through the covenant that He made with the Israelites in the wilderness with Moses. So from there, so knowing that history, then you can see how over hundreds of years until the Messiah came, also the Most High kicking out the northern kingdom, and then a good amount of the southern kingdom, which was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, and during the Greeks, Alexander the so-called Great, when he died, his generals took over, and then evils increased in the earth, and then they began waging war against Israel, and then they took a lot of us away captive out of Israel and placed us over there in Alexandria, which is over there in Egypt, which was a city founded by Alexander the so-called Great. And then that began the Hellenization, just aka like today we're Americanized, so they became Hellenized, living like Greeks. And then a lot of us got uprooted up out of the southern kingdom, and then that's how we began becoming Gentiles and becoming degenerate and a strange vine unto the Most High. So that's the history, and that's how it happened over hundreds of years. And that's why the Messiah came into the earth. The Most High brought Yahushua into the earth, and then he was his sole mission. He was on a mission the whole time, just to go ahead and track down the lost degenerate lost sheep of Israel that was living out, that was scattered abroad. So that's all it is. So when you go to Romans 11 and verse 16. For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. Holy means separate from all nations, and Israel was separate from all the heathen degenerate nations. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. So the first fruit be holy, that's going into chiefly the Lamb Yahushua, right? Because he's the first fruit, because he was offered up as that lamb without blemish, without sin, right? And then the lump is the rest of the Israelites. And this time it's going to be only the elect, the 1/3. As I went in the last video about, 1/3 is going to make it, and then 2/3 not when the Messiah returns. So for if the first fruit be holy, that's the Lamb Yahushua. The lump is also holy because the lump is going to believe on Yahushua and be able to receive that covering of his blood, his unblemished blood. That's going to make them holy as well, the 1/3 elect. And if the root be holy, and that's that root, that's that vine tree spoken of, what we just read back in Jeremiah chapter 2, 20 through 21, and then also in John chapter 15, speaking about that vine, abiding that we abide in the vine, and he in us. So we can do nothing only through the vine Yahushua, right? So that's what that's talking about. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. The branches are the elect of Israel. And then they're going to bring forth fruit as well. And so the root bring forth the branches, which is the elect. And chiefly, when you really get into it, the branches is really the 144,000, the governing body of the elect. And the fruit is going to be the remaining of the 1/3, that the men, women, and children that also believe on the Messiah. Because the elect, the 144,000 are going to be teaching, the prophets and servants, and teachers and elders. So that's what that's going into. So verse 17, and if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, being a wild olive tree, wert grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. So some of the branches be broken off, and that's how they, we just read that back in Jeremiah chapter 2. That's the lost sheep that became degenerate. And this letter is going out, and this book of Romans is going after the Roman Israelites, the Israelites that were living as Romans. And also in the book of Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, these are Israelites that were living as those different city or different country names. And so Paul is letting the Gentiles, this letter of Romans is that, this letter here to the Romans, the Israelite Romans, living as Romans, he's letting them know that the branches broken off are the Israelites. That's who So that's what that's saying. Okay, let's go. I'm gonna go ahead and get verse 23. And they also, if they abide not, still in unbelief. So this means if the native Jews that rejected the Messiah and the Most High cut them off, he's saying if they abide not still in unbelief. So meaning if they reject that unbelief and they begin to believe, if they go ahead and believe again, if they believe like they should have from the beginning, shall be grafted in. So if the Most High will receive them back if they go ahead and realize that, and they actually do gain faith and lose that unbelief and gain the faith, then they'll be able to come back in. And the Most High just did that temporarily, just to chasten them for a season so that they can get their mind right and get that belief in the Messiah that they must have to be able to come back in. For Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, is able to graft them in again. So the Most High, he cut off the native Jews because of their unbelief in the Messiah, right? But he'll be able to bring them back in if they go ahead and believe and repent, pray for forgiveness, repent, and believe that the Messiah, came. That it was Yahushua the Messiah. Verse 24. For if thou wert cut off of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree. So this is talking about if the Gentile Israelites were cut out of the olive tree, and they were wild by nature, going after the heathens and everything, the philosophies, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree. So they were living. So their natural state was just wild olive tree, just wild degenerate branches, right? And so if the Most High can go and get them, and then if the Most High can go get them and bring them back to the good olive tree, which is Yahushua, how much more shall these, talking about the unbelieving natives that rejected Yahushua, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches? So they were natural branches because they were naturally native and they were living in the homeland when the Messiah came on the scene, and they were, the Pharisees and Sadducees and publicans. They was always trying to trip up the Messiah, and all of the unbelievers that were native, they were rejecting the Messiah, right? So that's who these are. That's who that is. So it says, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches that the Most High cut off, be grafted into their own olive tree? So it's a greater feat that of the Most High bringing in and grafting in those riotous, those Gentile Israelites that were living as heathen. That was a greater work for the Most High to bring them back in to their original tree, to clean them up, because they're starting from ground zero. And how much easier would it be for the natural branches, the natural Jews that knew that the native Jews that already knew the history, and they didn't lose anything, they didn't lose the heritage. So it'll be easier for them to come back, to be grafted back into the olive tree, which is Yahushua. Why? Because they're a lot further ahead as far as their understanding and knowing who they are, unlike the wild branches, which were the lost sheep of Israel, the lost Gentile Israelites. So that's what that's saying. So now going to Matthew 18 and verse 11. For the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. And that's who that is, those wild branches getting grafted back in. That's the lost sheep of Israel. And the Most High, like I say again, the scriptures say the Most High provoked the natural branches, which were the native Jews that rejected the Messiah, provoked them to anger, to jealousy. I mean, not anger, but to jealousy, because the Most High went after the lost sheep, the lost Gentile Israelites that were living as heathen. Verse 12. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray? See, that's that gone astray. That's the lost Gentiles that the Most High went after to bring back. And Yahushua went after to bring back. in Paul's letters to bring them back, to teach them up. If a man have 100 sheep and one of them be gone astray, so that one right there represents the lost Israelites. Doeth he not leave the 90 and 9? So we're not, that he'll leave the natural branches, which were the native Jews that rejected Yahushua. He'll leave them that are already in the fold already. And he's gonna go find that lost sheep that don't know that they're Israelites. That's what's happening. And go with into the mountains, and those mountains represents all the other heathen nations where they were scattered abroad, the lost Israelites. And seeketh that which is gone astray. So those are those lost Israelites. And verse 13, and if so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep than of the 90 and 9 which went not astray. So the Most High, have more joy, and Yahushua have more joy in that lost one that didn't know anything, devoured by the heathen nation, and grabbing them back in, and rejoice over that. And it speaks about the nation. Scriptures. I'm roughly about to paraphrase, but it speaks about the angels that rejoice over one repentant sinner or repentant Israelite. So that's what's going on. Verse 14. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. So the Most High scattered us for a season, and it wasn't his goal. It wasn't for our decrease and destruction, but for our increase. It's for our chastening, correction, and for our increase at our last end. So that's the lost sheep of Israel that these letters are about. Nothing else. Not the heathen, because, they're degenerate, and that's their lot. Now we'll go to Psalms 119. And 176. I believe it's the last verse. Yeah. So this is King David. It says, I have gone astray like a lost sheep. Seek thy servant, for I do not forget thy commandments. So that's that's the parable that Yahushua just gave, the Messiah, about the man going after that lost sheep. And David is saying right here, seek thy servant. So come and rescue me and save me out of this lost state. For I do not forget thy commandments. And that show you what the prerequisite of the Most High saving the lost sheep. But that's going to be the elect. Not all of the lost sheep are going to be redeemed this time. It's going to be just 1/3 of the lost sheep. So, because all of them are not forget. Because most of them are forgetting the commandments. So, and we know David is representation of the elect, the 1/3, the house of David, and then the house of David is who? The body, the 1/3 body of Yahushua, because the hierarchy is what? Yahweh is the head of the man. Yahweh is the head of the Messiah, Yahushua. And the Messiah, Yahushua, is the head of the body, which is the 1/3 Israelites. So, and that's what that's going into. So even right here, David's speaking about he going astray as a lost sheep. And that's all the New Testament is about. The lost sheep that went astray. The Israelites that went astray, living as heathen, being influenced and playing the harlot with these other nations. And then Jeremiah 50:6. 50:6. My people hath been lost sheep. See, there it is again. See, it's saying the same thing in the Old Testament and New Testament. My people hath been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. And this is the false prophets. And this is the Pharisees, Sadducees of the times of Yahushua. And the modern day Pharisees and Sadducees are who? The Christianity pastors today, the Baptist church pastors that lead the people astray. They have turned them away on the mountains. They have gone from mountain to hill. So that's going into great nations and smaller nations, because we're scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. They have forgotten their resting place, because Our people are lost sheep. They think that these nations, they think that's their, their rest. As what Micah, I think it's what Micah 2:1 or 2:10. Arise, arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest. These heathen nations where we're scattered at is not our race. It's not our rest. So, hopefully this is, edifying. This is how the Israelites became, Paul's letters were to the scattered lost Israelites and not, to the heathen. The heathen is not getting grafted in because it's physical. It's a physical impossibility to graft in an orange tree branch with a apple tree branch. You have to, it has to be apples to apples and not, and oranges to oranges, not oranges to apples. You can't graft in oranges and apples and different fruits to each other, different fruits to different fruit trees to other fruit trees, But that's an analogy in this corner world, but with that being said, hope this video was edifying. The water to the Rakha Qudash for another video. To the next video, I say, Shalom.